Hey everybody, it's TorontoUnicorn, and I am here with a very special guest. This is Kathy K from the Strictly Anonymous podcast. She is here to be interviewed by me instead of taking all the interviews of interesting stories from everybody else on her podcast.
Oh,
So
yeah.
today is going to be a bit of a role reversal, and what we like to call that in the kink world is like a switch. Somebody who can do both sides. So I'm going to introduce you to Kathy for a few minutes, and then I'm just going to get going with some pretty intrusive questions.
Well, thank you for having me. I think I've had you on my show twice, right? I'm sure you'll be back. And now you have your own podcast, which I think is like super exciting. So this is good for you. Are you going to air this on your podcast too?
I am.
Oh, okay, great. So, yeah, I mean, I really am doing this, which I don't go on a lot of shows because I always feel like, oh, what am I going to talk about? Because I'm so used to hearing such salacious things from people that I'm like, when I talk about my shit, it's really not that salacious. Though I did do my 500th episode where I copped to like kind of everything I ever did, but it's so vanilla compared to, what I'm on the receiving end of my show.
Yeah.
So, I hope I don't disappoint you with my stories.
Well, what's really interesting is I did listen to that episode, the 500th episode, to get a good idea of you,
Yeah.
and I made some notes of things I'd like to drill into, just some good topics.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the most important questions that I actually wanted to get from you, because just so anyone who may not be familiar, you have a call-in show. It's not a video, so people call in, and you can even change their voice, and they just tell you their deepest, darkest secrets, and it's a friendly, non-judgmental conversation, and you air it, and these people remain anonymous. Is that
Me
right?
too. I'm obviously anonymous too. This is not like a problem with my camera. Yeah, everybody's anonymous. I don't change my voice, but I change. By the way, I change across the board everyone's voice, unless it's someone like you who's coming on my show and they're really their face is who they are and they're like a public person. But yeah, everybody's anonymous, including me.
So they can feel safe calling in from a blocked number and confessing to you, almost like you're a priest, but in almost like a non-judgmental way. And then you sharing these stories with other people gives insight to these other people into the secret lives of others. And that's valuable in tremendous amount of ways, as I'm sure you know. But one of the biggest questions I have for you, as somebody who has done this for, I think, over 7 years now, right?
Mm-hmm.
What have you learned about humanity? What have you learned about people based on what you've seen and heard?
That's a great question, but I just feel like, listen, the reason why I do my show and the reason why people tell me things about themselves is because I am truly interested in what people have to say. If you went to a party tomorrow with me, you would find me in the corner. Whoever I sit next to, I get their whole fucking life story because I am always learning about humanity. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what I love. And I mean, I see big shifts that are going on. I mean, typically on my show, because I am talking to people that have secrets a lot of the times and have been living a double life. I'm talking to a certain generation. It's not so young. It's not so much the younger people. It's the older people. So it's sort of like looking at humanity at a certain place in time, but it's ever changing. So I feel like I'm always learning so much on my show. And what I like is like smaller picture thing. Like I just like to hear real people stories because I think real life is messy and I'm a realist and I just don't think a lot of people like to show that things. And so a lot of people are like miserable about their own lives because they think, oh my God, I'm like fucking flawed. But what I want to show is like everybody is like, that's what life is about. And I feel like that is going to be the constant and is how it always is supposed to be. And that's what I love. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I think the more scandalous side of me is curious about, did it change whether or not you think that people like, is it impossible for people not to cheat? Because I think there's a lot of people who confess to cheating, things like that.
Yeah, get specific like that. Is it, listen, I've always thought that I, like as a woman, who has been with a lot of men, who has a lot of guy friends and I just have this, I always felt like I knew that guys needed a lot of variety. Just nature, a man as a nature, as an animal, his job is to like variety. It's what he's here for. So I feel like I always had a very realistic view of like, how could you expect someone to be monogamous, and I always hear these stories. So I always felt like as a woman, I wish we were raised in a society where we weren't taught that we're supposed to meet our Prince Charming and wind up in a monogamous relationship. If we all grew up in a society where it was never the way it's supposed to be, we would all be fucking fine. And I'll go even deeper to say that I think that it stays in place the way that it is because in a weird way, it really keeps women down and keeps them against each other as opposed to on each other's side. Men are so bro code with each other, like they fucking have each other's back, but women are always like a little bit like, on the defense of each other because it's all about like keeping their guy and are you fucking my guy and like all that kind of stuff to me is not good for women on so many levels that I wish it just didn't exist. But I think, until we change, and I think it's changing now, the whole thing about monogamy and that being the top of the mountain and the end goal, people are gonna cheat because shit happens.
Yeah, for me, it used to be the day when someone said I'm non-monogamous. I'm like, really? You're non-monogamous? But now when someone's monogamous, I'm like, really? You're monogamous?
Listen, some people are monogamous by nature. Okay.
I also think some people are monogamous because they're culturally conditioned to be, and they don't know that.
Yeah, and listen, but ignorance is bliss. If they're fine and they're happy, that's one thing. But if they're calling into my show because they're Googling porn and they're jerking off so much that they never want to have sex with their wife and there's a disconnect and they're lacking intimacy in the relationship, even if they're not cheating, then that's a problem.
Yes.
Right? And that's the kind of stuff that I get a lot of the times.
Wow. So you are really like everybody's secret diary. Like, they really tell you all their secrets. I touched on your 500th episode, and I have a few things. So first of all, me and you are going to have to go toe to toe on a topic, but I'm not going to go very long because it could cancel my show. So you say, who doesn't swallow? Like, who? Why don't you just swallow?
Yeah.
I cannot swallow. Like,
okay, so then what the fuck do you do? I feel like I never get that. Okay, so walk me through a blowjob. You're blowing a guy, right? And he's about to come. You just stop and like jerk him off and let it go on your tits or your face or something like that?
So I actually prefer for men to come in the condom while they're having sex with me. So the cum shot for me at a blowjob is not the end goal. The blowjob is the appetizer to the entree.
Oh, okay. So but say, let's go into like, say you have a boyfriend, okay? Yes. Not just in the regular world, or you're dating a guy or you have a booty call guy and he just wants a fucking blowjob, okay? But this is what I want to know. When you're giving that blowjob to a guy, just a one-off, like a guy just wants a fucking blowjob.
Yeah.
What do you do if you're not going to give up? There's no time for sex. You know what I mean? You got to go out. You're on your way. It's
not going anywhere above here. So it can go here.
Yeah.
I can make it erotic. It's not like I'm like, I'm like, give it to me, but like, give it to me down here, not up here. I think that I'm just pretty. I'll throw up. And like, I think even if I don't throw up, I'll gag because it's the aliveness of things in my mouth that I can't get over. And so even if it's cum or even if it's like probiotic yogurt in some ways, I'm like, I just really can't do this. So
it's a texture thing.
But in a way, it's also why I love being a swinger, because every guy I ever date or in the future, whatever, a lot of girls are going to swallow his cum,
No, you're right. In your world, that's why I was like, no, we're talking about two different worlds. That's the thing, right?
Yes.
There's the disconnect. That's why I'm like, I never really had the option for anything else. Sometimes in the vanilla world, it's just a blowjob. But in your world, it's never just a blowjob. I mean, it's a free-for-all. Everyone's kind of naked and they could just go fuck someone else, right?
And even blowjobs do exist, but you're right. There's the tits. There's always usually the tits. I think there's no other option unless I'm turned around. Yeah. But yeah, I would still make it fun. So that was something.
I have always swallowed. I don't, but I get that if you do have a texture thing, that could be a problem. But I would always make jokes like, you could really tell by the taste of jizz whether somebody like does drugs. A lot of stuff is in there. Like you could taste it, like the chemicals if they take drugs or they have on a lot of medication or they're fucking.
Oh, you're like a connoisseur, man, of cum.
Totally. You could tell. I once had a boyfriend that was snorting heroin. I didn't know. I didn't find out till a year after we dated that he was snorting heroin the whole time we were dating. And I remember once giving him head and swallowing his cum and immediately throwing up. And that was because I just did heroin. Like it really is concentrating in there. So I think in a weird way, it's better not to be swallowing a lot of chemicals. You don't know what the fuck is in there. If someone's doing drugs, it's not clean. It's in there. It's for 100%.
But one of the first advice videos I ever did on my page, which I got some grief from men on, which I understand, but I still stand behind it, is called Taking Cum in the Mouth is a Choice. That's the title of it.
Sure.
Because I didn't know that, just like my friends, until I was in my 30s.
So you felt like so you swallowed
I spit instead. But it was like,
that's what
it's
so funny. That's the visual I want. So, blowing the guy, right? And then he comes around and goes,
I'd be like,
yeah. That's what I think happens. That to me was so hilarious. Just fucking swallow.
I really doubt I'll take one ever again in the mouth, to be honest. It really is the reason I would shy away from a blowjob if it was still a part of it. So for me, once I cut that out, I started enjoying blowjobs a lot more. So yeah, but being a swinger,
it's 100% a choice. Like if you don't want to, but I think what I think is important though, in that scenario, if you're a girl that you want that, like you said, but I make it hot, like make it hot, because if you're like, I'm gonna spit. Imagine a guy is down there going down on you and you're like really getting really wet and he's like, I gotta fucking spit. Like how turned off are you gonna be? Like turn it on.
It's best to just gracefully exit.
You pretend that you fucking like it.
I can't pretend. I wouldn't pretend for any man, I don't think anymore. No. Okay, another thing is you said that you are into a bit of the cuck and tease and denial stuff. And I'm actually a bit curious because I don't have a lot of experience in tease and denial. And cucking I have a bit, but this is a fascinating area of cucking. It's growing in comfort in the community I'm in, because people used to see it as something that was embarrassing or in a humiliating situation for one of the participants, usually the husband or whatever, right? But it really can be just part of the architecture of the scene to have those two people have that great hot sex and the other one be in the chair beside them. It could be the desired scene. Yes.
Totally. Being a voyeur, there's so much that goes into it. And I always, on my calls, I always have the conversations because everyone has a different definition of what a cuck is. And sometimes I use it broader, right? I'll be like a cuck, but that person's like, but I'm not into being humiliated, which a lot of the people that I talk to, that's not a part of it. The truest cuck, that is a part of it, right? For me, when I say I would probably be a cuck queen, which is something I learned recently. And I learned that this was something that I was kind of into through doing my show and hearing people talk about it. I kind of put it together and I was like, oh my God, that's why I used to say that. And I think that. And then when I really started thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of hot. And I'm like, I think I have that, right? And then it's not the humiliation aspect. I think it's just like the voyeur kind of a thing and the sharing and the triangulation of it all and the taking back of maybe that, because a lot of it sometimes I've heard people say, and what was really fascinating to me on my show is like that person that was like, oh, I was so jealous, but I was able to turn that jealousy into like a sexual sort of feeling. It's like taking that energy and sending it someplace else. And I was like, oh my God, that is like taking the fucking power back. I was always a very super jealous person, but then I realized maybe it's because I wanted to be there. I wanted to see it. Like if I could change it into that, that's fucking hot. And once I started to look at it that way, I started to realize like that's what I would be into. Now, I have not been in a relationship since my son has been born. Like I've had a booty call relationship, but not someone I've been in love with.
Yeah.
How will that play out when I actually am in love and do it? I would like to try. And I say like, that's how I would maybe set up my future relationship. I don't know yet. I'll talk about it on my show once it happens, but I strive to do that. And I feel like that would be a turn on for me.
Can you describe cucking in your broad definition?
Cucking to me is when you get off on seeing your partner fuck somebody else.
Good.
Whether very see on video, be there, not be there. It's just the thought of the actual act of that kind of a thing. I mean, between me and you, I had a guy friend of mine who I was banging send me a video of him fucking somebody else. And it was because he felt like it looked like me from behind. you know, but I was like so interested in the video because it was him with somebody else. Do you know what I mean? And that really made me realize, like, oh, that's not. But like I said, was I in love with that guy? No. Will I be able to do that with someone that I love? That's my goal.
Yeah. I had this conversation last night at the club with somebody, but I said, I have to be excited about what I'm doing. And when I am with a man and I am sharing that man with a woman that we've mutually picked up, I am incredibly aroused by that situation. It's not like I'm jealous because I'm there. I'm part of it, even if I'm not currently being penetrated. You know, I'm part of this whole thing. And I think for me, that was it. I had so much fun. I don't think I've ever had a negative feeling so far in a threesome or anything like that. But again, I'm also kind of a unicorn. I like to say, like, I'm like the candy that doesn't have to go to the dentist kind of thing. Like I can, you know, kind of go in and be in a fun few nights. But you're right. When it's somebody you love, I still think I would get the same joy. I do, as long as they didn't cheat on me outside of those lines.
I mean, those kinds of callers always blow my mind when they have this partner that allows them, when they're still cheating. Like, oh my God, you have so much dysfunction there. But I do believe that I would be able to do that. I don't think I would ever go into a relationship, you know, expecting it to be completely monogamous. So I am monogamous. I don't have the desire for variety. Okay. And that's not just because I'm a woman, because I talk to plenty of women that want that. Just me as an animal, I like one person. You know, I don't need the variety. I need the variety in like the fantasy and the act and what we're doing and stuff, but I like the same person. Even with my booty calls, I'd have like the same person I banged for years just because I didn't want different people all the time. But I think it would add to that, and the variety sometimes for some people, even if they're monogamous by nature, is maybe that cucking and seeing their partner with someone else, or having that kind of stuff add to their relationship.
Yeah, that's true. So it's interesting that you get to learn a little bit about yourself from your callers, right? When you start to find things that almost like tickle your soul and you're like, oh, what is that?
I mean, that came over time, because I'm going to tell you, I didn't start hearing a lot about the cucking stuff until later. It always came in waves. Like in the beginning, it was a lot of certain things. And then when I have something on, like the first cuck queen I have on, and then boom, you know, ever since then, I just get emails all the time from cuck queens, because people find that content and they're like, me too, kind of thing. So the it was first the guys wanting to see their partners with somebody else. That was something that I was like, whoa. And then just the more I listened to people, I would put things together. I would never use the term I'm into tease and denial until somebody called in and talked about it. I'm like, oh, that's why I've dry humped in my 40s. And that's why I've, like, you know, been like, no, let's only, like, we can't do anything, and created weird boundaries just so I could have like hot, no touching anything kind of sexual, crazy experiences, you know?
Wow.
Like I said, I would have never labeled it that way until I heard people put it to terms. I think I spoke on my 500 episode about halfway in guy, you know, the guy who'd only put his dick in halfway and sit there. That was a total tease and denial thing. I didn't realize, but I fucking love that kind of stuff, because I think the addict in me, like, if I like something, I never want it to end, you know? So drawing it out and not getting to the end and staying in that place where it's so fucking good, like, I like that to last a long time. And because I'm not multi-orgasmic, I think tease and denial works for me, because it just stretches out the act, and you could keep yourself in the height of, like, just, it's like really amazing, you know? Awesome. And I've done that in ridiculous things, and people have been like, how could you dry hump? And how could you play the halfway in game? And it's like, yeah, duh, it's called tease and denial. Now I know the word for it. And some people like use it as a kink, and it's actually very hot.
Yeah. Something I have learned about, you know, being in this lifestyle for myself specifically is learning that I know it sounds a little bad, but cock teasing. Now, I want to preface this by saying I'm ethical. Okay, I didn't used to be as ethical. I used to get a kick out of, when I was in my 20s, hitting on men, you know, and make, you know, whatever. Poker tables, they were really effective. But now I found a way to have certain friends in my life that I'm allowed to tease, and they're not allowed to fuck me for their own reasons, not because I'm innocently allowed to cock tease people. I was like, wait a second, this is kind of everything I kind of wanted, you know, is to be like,
but it turns you on.
Kind of, but like not necessarily turns me on towards him, turns me on in life to be almost like that stripper I never could be, where I
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
think I want to fuck them, but I slip out the back at the end of the night, like
Yeah.
that's kind of what I wanted to do. But like, yeah, so in a way, I'm like, I kind of get enjoyment out of that.
Yeah, that's every guy's worst fear. Every guy thinks that every woman's doing that on purpose all the time,
It's true. And I don't do it to people anymore, like I said, but when I
you
have
do
a
it the right way now.
situation,
Yeah.
well, it's like it's a consensual thing where he's probably attracted to me. I don't really talk about it that much, but girls can know,
Yeah.
And he's just not allowed to fuck me. And so I mentioned before about how I'm ethical. So as a unicorn in the lifestyle, I'm ethical. If there's someone who's married and not having an open relationship, I'm not going to be in that dynamic in any way.
Yeah.
I just don't need to be involved in any situation where people get hurt. So that's the situation. So I'm still allowed to like wear my outfits and like, be myself and just know he's not allowed to fuck me.
Yeah. So that's flirting. But I mean, when you take it a step further and do that, because to me, that could be if you're actually with a guy one-on-one, I mean, that could be a little bit of tease and denial if you take it a little step further and, really create those boundaries, but you're only allowed to take it to a certain place. And it really, for the both people, it could be really hot.
Yeah. Well, even I'm still learning from you, right? Tease and denial. I never really resonated before, but I was like, wait, I'm calling it cock tease. You're calling it tease and denial.
Yeah,
I'm like, are they the same thing?
You could take that thing. It's about creating these weird boundaries or saying like I had this one guy and it was all dysfunctional. It was kind of like I was so attractive. We had amazing chemistry, but we were not right for each other. But we couldn't keep our hands off of each other. So I'm like, I got to the point where I made all these rules, like you can't touch me, you can't kiss me. But I'd go over his house and we wind up like with all our clothes on as adults, okay, just on top of each other with your breath on the face and the butt and not able to kiss or touch and cock teasing, like you say, to, as far as you could take it without anything happening. So you're still at that line, but it could be a really hot scenario. I'm telling you.
I'm telling you, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a lot of episodes, you've had a lot of calls, and you have mentioned a few times about which ones are more popular. So if you could categorize in terms of viewership, what are people watching in terms of confessions? What would you say you've learned there?
Gangbangs.
Okay.
Girls, gangbangs, girls, gangbangs, hot wife and gangbangs with women, or cuck queen. Just listen, I try now, I've been doing my show over 7 years. I just started monetizing it maybe like a year and a half ago. And then once I did, I had to I took notice of stuff like that. Cause you're like, okay, this stuff does better. I got to do more of this. It's a business at the end of the day. So I started to really put a call out for more women. Cause it used to be all guys that have a woman every now and then. Now I get tons of emails from women coming on, and my women episodes do effing great. Not like a woman cheating. Cheating is like the lowest. Just so
interesting,
yeah, very interesting. Nobody likes a cheater, and they don't even want to listen to it. They're not as highly downloaded. What the most downloaded is like girls that are into gangbangs, threesomes, orgies, anything. People want to know, especially men who are listening to my show, that women like you exist. That women like sex as much as they do. They want to know that, and they want to hear from women that talk about that openly, and they do on my show. So that, and the extreme stuff is of course going to always be great.
Well, what's really fascinating is I'm going to bring this back to a point you made earlier, and that I noticed even just last night when I was at the club, and it was a really wonderful night. But we noticed that in this lifestyle, women are not threats to other women because we're allowed to share. And so just like you said, you wish women didn't act so threatened by other women. We literally have this guy we call the goddess maker, and he's just, we've seen him have sex a few times, and everyone was like kind of getting in line, and myself included. Like, I'm like, I'll pick my number. And so it's one of those things where, him and one of my other friends were hooking up the other day in front of me, but I was like, it did not bother me at all, because I knew like, I'll just get my time next time. Like, it's like not, when were women ever that okay,
Never.
And I used to be a jealous girl too. So I think it's really interesting that the lifestyle can soften that. And in a way, we can all exist, men and women and trans and everyone, in a place where sex is not used as a weapon against people. It's used as a hedonistic part of our lifestyle.
Yeah, and women aren't pitted against each other, you know? I remember I had a guy that I was really into, and this is very honest with me because it shows what a jealous bitch I was. And he was, he did a lot of business. He was always on a plane traveling all over the world, and he did a lot of business in Russia, and those women are like 10.5. Every single one of them is like a fucking 12 on a scale of 1 to 10. I'd be on the roof of my pool. I had a pool on my roof, and I'd be hanging out there. There was 2 Russian girls who lived in my building sitting there, and I hated them. I hated them so much because they were like what my guy liked, you know, where I would never feel that way. Nor now I'm not with that guy anymore. Like, I don't care. I see a beautiful Russian girl. I think, oh my God, she's like fucking beautiful. But that time in my life, because I was so jealous that he was fucking hot Russian girls, I hated every Russian girl. That has nothing to do with them. That pits me against them. And that's terrible for women. You know, and that was strictly because I thought this is who my guy fucking wants, if not me. Whereas if like he was able to fuck hot girls, I wouldn't care. And that's what I think is bad for women, because, and I just don't think guys have that with each other.
I don't. Well, in the sex club, they're not the ones that seem, you know, changed by the lifestyle environment. It's the women. The women are the ones that are like, I can imagine. We don't cock block either there. So at a normal club, if my friend is about to get cornered on the way to the bathroom by some guy and I'm going to be left alone, that's a threatening situation. I got to go get my friend back. But in a club, I'm like, oh, good. Is she going to get laid? All right, well, I'll wait for her. Like, the whole point is to let everyone go and have their own experiences. And so it's just really, it's marvelous that what happens in this lifestyle and how people can actually be almost like changed. And in my opinion, deprogrammed, decultural, you know, indoctrinated, whatever you want to call it, about monogamy. And this is one thing I'll say about that. It's funny how we all just kind of laughed off the fact that we were all lied to about Santa Claus, but then we hold firm for Prince Charming.
Yes. I'm sorry, but there was somebody that had posted a wedding at some point on Facebook or whatever it was, and like they were like in a horse and buggy. And I am like, how are people watching this? Like, you were in a fucking horse and buggy, like you're the queen. Like, you were in America in the middle of a cement road, and you're on a horse, but you're not a princess. How do people believe this? I'm like not sort of wired that way. I don't have that romantic bone in my body. I always say, like, if I went over to his house and he put rose petals to a bathtub, I'd fucking laugh. I would not be horny. I'd be so dried up. I would just, I'm not into that kind of stuff. So I don't get it. I never wanted to get married when I was little. I'm like a little bit too much like a realist. And it's okay. I'm not saying it's so bad, but it's a little bit unrealistic.
Yeah. Well, when you say realist, like, I like laugh at people who think about when they think about, are we going to get married? And I was like, okay, so you're asking if I'm going to legally contract myself to somebody to hold a promise no one has ever held before. I just don't see the need for that. Like, really, like, if statistics are really not pointing to a positive outcome. So I just think it would be, I almost, just like a monogamy question where we said it's almost becoming more mainstream to be non-monogamous. I'm suddenly wondering, like, you do want to get married? Like, I really have transitioned so far to living outside whatever the, government structures, whatever were. You just live however you want to live. You don't have to get married. You don't have to have a divorce lawyer. I'll never need a divorce lawyer. Amazing.
But I have to say, the other thing that I have found on my show is I do talk to a lot of people that are happily married. As many people that I talk to, like, I always say, I love a swingers gone wrong story, or I like cheating stories, because I think it's the truth and people could learn from those episodes too. And they're all very different. But I have had a lot of couples that have been together since the dawn of time, and then after many years opened up their relationship, are living their best lives. It can work, and it does work. And I like to show that it's never so black and white. There's different things to aspire to, but it all exists. I do believe some people are monogamous. I do believe sometimes marriages can last. A lot of them don't, though. Yeah. And that's what you have to say, like, why it's like fitting a square peg into a round hole, a lot of them. Yeah. But then you find the ones that are great, and they just, and those are the ones that are more successful at opening up a relationship or having that kind of non-monogamous thing, So, I mean, I would like to be in a long-term relationship just to be able to say I did it, because for me, it's very easy to be alone. It's very hard for me to be in a relationship, and that I like a challenge, and I like to do things that are hard. So that's why I'd want to do it one day in my life, to say I did it. I was able to do that because I love being alone. That's easy for me. But, relationship people, it's the opposite. It's very hard for them to be alone, and it's very easy for them to be in a relationship. Everyone's kind of different.
Yes, it's true. And I've gotten very comfortable being alone too, to the point where somebody has to add value to my space.
Yeah.
is better than when I'm alone. Otherwise, I would choose to be alone.
Yeah, if you like being alone, like look at your little kitty in the background. I used to have a cat and I was happy. Now I actually have a fucking son. And if you think like if I was happy alone with a cat, I mean, now it's like fucking bliss because I have a child. So it's hard. Like you said, it has to be someone that really is additive to your life or creates that kind of great companionship. Because if not, but I think what the opposite is true for people that are always in relationships. For them, being alone is so torturous
Yes.
that they are willing and able to put up with the troubles of having someone always in their fucking face, you know, because the opposite of that is something that would be harder for them. Whereas for us, it's the opposite, harder to be with someone than to be alone. So that's always what it's going to be. And I just think we're all kind of different. Me and you are wired more the same.
Yes, not only are we wired, we're wired very similar in other ways too. So I'm going to just wrap off a few that I found to be interesting correlations.
Yeah.
So you were a badass in school. So was I. You said you got kicked out a few times.
You too?
I didn't get kicked out, but I had the record for most female suspensions, and I still hold it a badge of honor for that.
Yeah.
I was
a nightmare. I remember being on the bus when I was like in 9th grade, and all the tough girls, seniors walk up to me and they stand right in front of me. I'm like, what the fuck are they going to say? And they're like, so you're the infamous so-and-so that we hear every day on the loudspeaker, because every day on the loudspeaker was like, blah, 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 come down to the office. I'm suspension every single fucking day.
That's so funny. I even like carved my name in the wooden bench in detention. So like every time I'd like add a little bit more to the curvature.
Yeah, but you know what Barbara Corcoran would say, you know, she's on Shark Tank. I love Shark Tank. She would say that, you know, people who didn't do well in school make the best entrepreneurs because they're not followers. You know, it's not so great to be a follower, you know? And so, and people who are true leaders, it's very difficult to be in school because you're just always being told what to do. You can't really think for yourself. So in a weird way, it does say something positive about our personalities.
It's true. And then you also read things back to front. So yes, magazines, I start at the back and flip this way. Yes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it says something about our brains or something, right? Like, I don't know. But, and then I just found that then we have careers where we help people, we talk about sex really bluntly and openly. And it's just funny, the other commonalities that I weave throughout, right? And and more that we probably haven't even uncovered yet. But it's just fascinating how the rebels from our, you know, younger years turned into be rebels of, you know, cultural conditioning, frankly.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking the other day, I always talk about this documentary that I watched many, many years ago, which was like, oh, I want to be a swinger one day. It was called The Lifestyle. It was when I was dating this one guy, and I love documentaries. Before people watch documentaries, I was always watching them. This is like 20 years ago. There was a lifestyle documentary called The Lifestyle. My boyfriend called me up, you want to watch this? And I was like obsessed with it. And it was like a documentary where they took like 3 or 4 different couples and they watched them swing, you know, and they were all swingers for a whole year. And each couple was at a different point in their relationship. You know, they were all very different. Some were just starting out swinging, some or just starting out dating and started swinging. Some were like double-digit years, you know. And then you saw sort of the progression. You learned all about their swinging life, and then you found out where they were after that year was done, that they, you know, documented it. And it was so fascinating to me. And I remember thinking, like, that's the top of the mountain to me spiritually. As a spiritual person, I really am as jealous as I could have been in my whole life. I was never sort of possessive. I have this belief that we don't really own anyone, you know, not even my son. He is his own person with his own brain and his own life. I am just here to help him with his life. That kind of stuff is very important to me. So, and I believe that in relationships. So I always felt like couples that could get to the place where they are so in love with each other, you know, and so like, you know, that they could let go of that. To me, that's top of the mountain. That's the evolution of being like a very sort of evolved person, not in a dysfunctional way, you know, like some people are doing, but in the healthiest way where it is like, it doesn't mean anything. It's just, we don't have to own that part of ourselves and let's just go out and do it together, you know. And I just thought to myself the other day, I'm like, it's so interesting that I was obsessed with this documentary. Would I have any idea that so many years later I would have a show where I'm talking to these people that I was like so kind of like watching, like, oh, I wish I could be like them, you know. So it's kind of fascinating. My show started by accident. I didn't start out to do a show about sex. It just happened by accident. So it is kind of interesting, though, that it wound up that way, considering I was always open-minded and curious about the world and always sort of saw it as a positive thing.
And I think I overheard this at least once in one of your episodes where you said that, maybe when, I don't know what age you said, but when you're this old, you'll be a swinger.
Yeah, like, 60s.
60s, that's what it was.
Yeah,
I'd love to ask about this because I find that a very interesting thing to hear. So I would love to delve into that.
Yeah, I mean, I just always felt like, why fucking not? That's the time to do it. I always said, like, there's different things that I think of. I think a lot of people just like do everything right away. It's like, why not wait for some things? You're going to live a long time. That I was like, oh, that would be something to do, like, when you're like in your 60s, because it's so, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a contrarian, like it's just so contrary to what you would think other people would do. I don't know, but for me, it was always like, that would be something I'd do way later, and maybe it was because I always knew I wouldn't probably be in a relationship until then anyway. Because I don't know that I would do it like you. I mean, I really admire somebody like you that fucking went in there solo. Yeah. For me, it would be about being in a relationship together and doing it together. Gotcha.
I see. Wow. I think it's interesting because like your body is as tight as it's gonna be now, and in terms of like me too, right? And so I just think that if I were to wait till 60, I just might not have the same level of experience.
No, you're right. Yeah, it's so stupid to think, actually. Really.
It's just, this is your asset. Unfortunately, it is like your body, your face is an attraction tool. And so I'm not saying people in their 60s don't have success. They do.
No, you're right.
But it is one of those things where I'm like, why wait? If you're going to be looked at like the most prime piece of rib to a bunch of hungry men, everyone deserves to feel like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta get in that relationship now. Yeah, I think I always said, maybe I thought 50s. I don't know. When you're younger, like age is so different. Like now 60s, 70s is old to me because I'm in my early 50s. It's like maybe when I was younger, I was like, oh, when I'm in my 50s, I'm going to do it. I don't know, but I always felt like it would be something. I mean, what I took from that episode or that documentary, I just think it's something that should be done when you're like pretty fucking solid, and wherever that is solid in your own skin, like you were when you fucking took that plunge, you were solid in yourself, and it was about doing that for yourself. And to me, it's the same thing with couples when it's done because you're so solid and you want to take your relationship that's already great to an unbelievable level. And I just think I knew at the time when I was younger, I just didn't have that. I was a fucking mess, like for a long time. I was sexually acting out in negative ways. To me, I like people on my show. I mean, it's okay. Like I said, life is messy to have people on that are doing it in a negative way, but I really like when there's just only love and light attached, like your girl, Roxy, who was on my show. Yeah. I mean, that's a bitch that like, it's like a beautiful story, but it's all sex, but it's this wonderful, positive thing that she's doing. Whereas sometimes you have somebody that's acting out sexually in a dark way, in a negative way. And I was in that kind of area when I was younger. So I always knew it wouldn't be something positive for me to do then. I think you want to do it in the right way.
That's a very good point, because the people I help to get gangbangs fulfilled, they are in a good headspace. They're comfortable. They're not there to disassociate, like for the most part. I mean, there is something to be said about disassociating in subspace for certain submissives, sure.
Yeah.
But there's people, for the most part, I don't think I would be eager to help somebody who was there because they had a bad day and they just needed to like forget about it for a minute. I'm like,
or somebody that was like really high on drugs and couldn't even do the sober, it's maybe acting out. I have a girl that I'm posting her episode soon, and it's really interesting. And but one of her first stories was being like sex trafficked, and like she had very bad childhood and all this stuff. And then at the end of the conversation, she was telling me like she was thinking of maybe camming. Now, I've had a lot of girls on my show that have cammed. I have a lot of women on my show that have OnlyFans, that are prostitutes, everything. But with this girl, I was kind of like, maybe you want to unpack your stuff first before you go do that, because you don't want that to be coming from a place of like PTSD, which she was having because of all that stuff. Do you know what I mean? There's a difference.
True. There is a big difference.
Yeah. And some people always want to put everybody that's doing anything sexual with girls like it's all dark. It's really not, actually. There's some strippers that do it because they love it, or there's some strippers that do it because they're fucked up and they hate their daddies and they're working it out and they're wasted every night. Yeah. But there are some that aren't, you know, and I think that's the difference. And I like to show the lightness and the positive stuff, because I want people to believe that girls can be that way, you know. But when I hear a girl like that, where that has a lot of stuff, I'm like, why don't you put a hold on that? I feel like her mom, like, why don't you put a hold on the camming until you kind of unpack yourself in therapy, and then take charge of your life and do what you want to do. And actually, she just wrote me the other day, because I'm like putting her episode up. She didn't wind up doing any of that stuff. I was like, I think that's good.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Yeah, you gotta, I mean, on my show, I get to talk to people for a full hour.
Yeah.
So I really get the whole picture, and I grill them like Barbara Walters. So I really get an understanding of what's going on, which I love.
Yeah. What have you learned about women in general that surprised you?
That surprised me? What have I learned? I mean, listen, I think all you girls that are out there swinging by yourselves, having gangbangs, girls that like variety, that to me was like, I didn't believe there were women like that. You know what I mean? Like, that's very surprising. And I love those kinds of stories because it's so not me, you know, but it is women. And like your girl Roxy, that was like, all she wanted was variety. I love someone that like that creates this whole picture of a woman that I never knew existed, you know, stuff like that to me. Someone like you who went to swinging alone and how it really, you came into your own, that kind of stuff I love. And those kinds of women and women's stories that I have surprise me, because I don't think I even knew those existed. I think I was more like everybody else, that you would think there's always darkness or people are fucked up or women aren't like that, you know, but they are, and they're having fucking fun.
So you actually just reminded me something I was thinking about the other day, when I'm trying to think about the impact I want my channel to have and my podcast and everything to have. And I'm putting my friends up front on their blurred, telling their stories about having a gangbang, having an unexpected orgy, whatever. And I do it not for the spectacle.
Yeah.
Yes, it might have started that way, but I do it to show women sexually empowered and in such a way that makes other women feel, well, if she can do it, so can I. And I have seen that response in the people who have then shown up to the club and then said, oh my goodness, like, especially me, a girl came up to me and said, you know, I'm really, you know, uncomfortable in my body, my weight. And she's like, but then I see you and you can do it. So why not? And I'm like, it's just funny because I've been so comfortable in my body for a while now. I'm like, I'm chubby? Really? Like, I kind of forgot. Like,
awesome. Yeah.
Right. And so I'm like, yeah, I forgot.
That's so great.
Yeah, so it's nice to see that impact too. And so it's nice to hear from you specifically that it's a good to see these women represented, that they do exist, that they do enjoy sex, that we can get along and share men and not have a cat fight after. You know, it's really good to know that that is making its way through. So that's great.
Yeah, that's why now I don't, like, thank God I have so many women emailing me that I can have like a woman on every Sunday, which I love. And the stories never get old. And there's always another one. Like I said, the girl I'm airing tomorrow, this Wednesday. It's a little dark, but it's still a hilarious episode. But I just love the ones like you and your friend that you turned me on to, and mostly all the other women that
That's so cool. I'm going to ask you 2 more questions and then we'll part. But the next question is, what have you learned in general about men?
Oh, like there were certain kinks that I just never knew existed. I never knew there were so many guys that wanted to watch their girl get fucked by somebody else.
Right?
Never knew. And let me tell you, I say this, it's very true. I always had some girlfriends in my life. I'm not just a guy's girl. I always had to have my girlfriends, but I always had a lot of guy friends too. I need guys to be friends with because I could really be myself with them. I'm super aggressive. So I always had guy friends that were very close to me, and we would rap about sex openly. Not one of them ever fucking copped to wearing pantyhose or wanting to watch their girl fucking another guy or any of these things. I hear all these guys talking about. I'm like, why? They wouldn't even tell me. I think a lot of guys keep it under wraps, but it is a very highly downloaded thing. So it is something that a lot of guys are effing into. And I never knew that. Well, I don't think the word on the street, like every guy I told in the beginning when I was doing it, like, oh my God, I would be so jealous. I would be so jealous. And I do ask that question to a lot of guys that are on my show. Sometimes it's not so set up and they just happen. And I say to them, like, if it was 2 minutes before it happened and I stopped that scene and said, what would you guess is going to happen here? Are you going to be fucking jealous? Or are you going to be turned on? And they'd be like, no, I would be psychotically jealous. Yet it happens and they're psychotically turned on. Like, how interesting is that, you know? So
fascinating. Okay.
I think stuff like that is interesting to me.
One of the things I've always been surprised by throughout my life is when men confided in me that they like to suck dick here and there, and or had a fantasy about it. And it's not like they go around and tell their friends this, you know? And so the fact that a lot of them would tell me individually, I'm like, wow, so many of them do. And even if it's not something that comes naturally right away, when they're in a, you know, a more sex positive environment where there isn't so much rigidity about who's touching who, whatever, sometimes new fantasies can emerge, and people can change late in life. So I've seen it happen. And if you know, that's one of the things I've learned about men also is, you know, they're just as curious and they're just as human and sensitive as you know, the rest of us, just looking to be accepted, invited, and special. So, you know, it's nice to hear that as well. Okay, my last question for you is, you know, you've done this podcast for 7 years. You've talked to countless people. So if you were to describe your life to someone who has never heard of you, and you're calling into some show to say, oh my goodness, I am this anonymous person that because I know that you're really closeted about this. Only a small handful of people know who you actually are. So that's your secret life. You have a secret life, just like a lot of people on your end. And so if you were to call in and talk about what it's like to have a secret life, what is it like to have a secret life?
You know, it really is. Someone pointed that out to me, and I thought it was so interesting when I put questions out to my listeners for my 500th episode. Someone says, like, do you consider your podcast your secret life? And I was like, oh my God, that's so smart. Yeah, it is my secret life, because it is a secret. It didn't start out that way. It turned out that way. And now at this point, because I'm a mom, it's like, it's hard, actually, you know, because I love what I do. And it takes up all my time. It's a 24/7 job. It's my career. It's what I do now. I don't have any other thing. This is what pays my bills. I do very well and I love it. And I can't tell people about it. And it's hard. Like recently I talked to a babysitter. I just had some young girl babysitting me for a couple of days. She's like, oh, so what do you do? And I'm like, it winds up to be a real problem, you know, sometimes, because how do you tell people what you do when you don't want to give up the whole story? And there is so much. To me, there's a lot of explaining that has to go into it, unfortunately, because of the topic of the show. And I know how to title an episode to make people listen to it, right? Yeah. But there's so much backstory I have to give somebody that I don't tell people, and it can be a problem sometimes. And I don't like that. But my anonymity has become like a really interesting thing that works for my show. And at this point, I would only give that up for a lot of money.
Good for you.
It would have to be a really big thing, because it works like this, and it's just a problem sometimes, but it's my secret life that no one knows. A lot of people don't know. And, but if I had to out myself to become bigger, and there was enough on the table for that, and I knew that it would be really big and I could get my voice out there more and help more people, I would totally do it. I'm not ashamed of what I do. I love what I do. I think I'm absolutely helping people. I am as non-judgmental in my real life as I am on my show. Like, this is really fucking who I am. I don't give a shit about sex. I never have taken it that seriously. So at the end of the day, I don't feel bad about my show, and that's not why I'm anonymous. It sort of happened that way by accident in the beginning, but I keep it that way now because people are still judgmental, and they, you know, it's just, there needs a lot more years before people could like accept it the way I would need it.
The good news is I'm pushing against that current every day. And I like to say, I don't mind taking the shame stains, because they can F right off.
Yeah, people like you are helping people like me. You know, it's great. My problem is I have a son to take into consideration, and he's a young child, you know, and you're dealing with parents and moms. And there's it's like a lot of small talk. I live in a world of small talk, and that's hard in situations like that, you know, but I know for my son, like, he will know what his mother does for a living. I don't feel bad about it for my son. I think the only thing I'm going to do to him is make him like less dysfunctional, because we're open about sex and it doesn't really fucking matter. So, you know,
it's true. It's true. So I'm going to have to park the interview there, but I would love for you to let people know how they could be on your show if they've got something to talk about, and then shout out all your links.
Yeah, please. I'm always looking for people to call into my show. I'm always putting a shout out because I always feel like you're never going to know where you're going to get the next great story, right? I'll have a million cheaters on my show. Everyone is different. So if you have a naughty secret life or even an open life that you want to talk about that's interesting, you could email me, strictlyanonymouspodcast@gmail.com. You could go to my website, strictlyanonymouspodcast.com, and click on Be on the Show, or you could DM me. Go follow me on Instagram or Twitter. It's @strictanonymous. And then what I love my YouTube channel. YouTube is a great platform for my show, even though I don't show my face like you and it's just audio. I found a lot of people there and created an audience over there. And I love YouTube for the comments. I love talking about this kind of stuff, obviously. Yeah. So, and that's where I could get into conversations with people about the topics on my show. And I love that. And so you could always go over and make sure to subscribe to me on YouTube.
So a good way to connect with you is actually drop a decent comment, a thoughtful comment on one of your podcast episodes of YouTube.
Even a judgy comment, okay?
All right.
But don't give it if you can't take it. I love a good debate. I like people with fucking opinions, even if it's opposite mine. But don't get mad when I come back and tell you you're fucking wrong. Let's talk about it. I love having debates and conversations about the stuff that I have on my show. So that's what I love about YouTube. So people could go, just follow me there anyway, because you're going to be showing this on YouTube, right? That's a great, I love YouTube. So follow me on YouTube too.
Yeah, so I will be tagging the Strictly Anonymous podcast here on YouTube as well as on my podcast channel and putting links so we basically binge watch all of her content if you haven't seen all of it yet. So thank you so much to Kathy K from the Strictly Anonymous podcast. It has been super thrilling to have you here.
Thank you. This was so much fun. You're a good interview. You asked some good questions. You asked good questions.
And thank you to Cannabis getting me a little ready.
Thank you.
It was great chatting. Bye.
Bye.